At 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, Flight 447 looked like any other routine journey homeward. The engines hummed with steady rhythm. The cabin lights glowed softly, and passengers drifted between sleep, films, and idle chatter. But beneath the calm exterior, fate was arranging a storm that would soon turn a routine crossing into a test of survival. In seat 14C sat Sophia Carter, her jeans faded, her navy sweater plain, and her dark hair tied back with the sort of casual carelessness that made her appear like just another traveler returning from holiday. To the world, she was invisible, a woman with a worn paperback balanced against the armrest and a restless hand adjusting the small window shade for the third time. The December sun spilled through the oval glass, painting bright streaks across the page she was pretending to read. To strangers, she looked ordinary. To herself, she was still trying to bury the extraordinary life that had once defined her. A life of roaring jet engines and carrier decks slick with salt spray, years spent dancing with gravity and machines built for war, years that had ended not with medals and parades, but with disgrace. Sophia had once been one of the Navy's most promising fighter pilots. She had flown the F-18 across hostile skies, landed on steel decks at night in storms, and built a reputation for courage and precision. She had been trusted with the missions others hesitated to take. Her path was leading toward command, but all of it had been stripped away in a single moment when judgment and protocol collided. During a training exercise, her squadron leader made a mistake. Two aircraft angled toward each other on a collision path. There had been no time for the chain of command, no time for hesitation. Sophia broke formation, forced both pilots into evasive maneuvers, and saved lives and millions in equipment. But she had disobeyed. Her decision embarrassed a superior whose father wore an admiral's stars. The board cared not for the lives she saved, only for the authority she had challenged. Stripped of rank, career, and future, she was left with nothing but silence. Now she lived in Denver, working as a technical writer for an aerospace contractor. Translating dense engineering documents in a language bureaucrats could understand, it paid the bills, kept her apartment warm, and allowed her to blend into the rhythm of civilian life. She drove an old sedan, shopped for groceries unnoticed, and tried to convince herself that anonymity was peace rather than exile. But old instincts never died. As the plane cruised west, Sophia's senses sharpened unconsciously. She listened to the subtle changes in engine tone, the press of cabin pressure against her ears, the almost invisible shiver of turbulence, things that passengers around her never noticed, but which her body cataloged automatically. Her book lay forgotten as she watched the cabin crew. Ashley, the senior attendant, moved through the aisles with professional grace. Yet her smile was too controlled, too rehearsed, and the younger attendant, Emma, kept glancing toward the cockpit with a nervous flicker that stirred something familiar in Sophia's chest. That look was one she had seen before in squadron mates when equipment malfunctioned mid-flight. The look of people who knew something was wrong, but did not yet know what to do. She shifted in her seat, forcing herself to stay calm, telling herself she was imagining things, that 5 years away from service had warped her perspective, but the air around her felt heavy, not with turbulence, but with tension. When the call button chimed repeatedly near the front of the cabin, she noticed Ashley's mask slip for just an instant. Concern crept across her face before she pulled it back into place. Sophia closed her book completely now, her heartbeat steady, her mind racing through possibilities, engine problem, mechanical fault, crew illness, security breach. She had been trained to think like this, to prepare for worst cases while everyone else trusted routine. Minutes stretched like hours, the hum of the engines constant, but the silence from the cockpit deafening. The captain had not spoken since their last altitude adjustment, and no reassuring voice filled the intercom. The passengers shifted restlessly, but only Sophia seemed to sense the magnitude of what was unfolding. Then she saw Ashley hurry down the aisle with a medical kit, stopping at row 8 where John Miller, a physician, sat reading. She whispered quickly. His face changed instantly from casual to alert. Together they moved toward the cockpit curtain, disappearing from view. Sophia knew, then, this was no ordinary disturbance. Doctors were not called for spilled drinks or fainting passengers. They were summoned when something vital had failed. Her stomach tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. A crisis was building behind that locked cockpit door, and she might be the only one on board with the skills to understand what it meant. Sophia Carter felt the hum of the engines beneath her feet, steady and unwavering. Yet she could not shake the unease creeping through her veins. She had spent too many hours inside cockpits, too many nights in briefing rooms where small anomalies became the difference between life and disaster. The cabin crew whispered in the galley near the cockpit door. Ashley's voice controlled, but too sharp, Emma's eyes darting nervously to the passengers as if trying to decide whether to maintain the illusion of calm or admit what every instinct told them. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The captain, Robert Hale, had not spoken to the passengers in nearly 40 minutes. First Officer Emma Davis was equally silent. There were no reassuring updates, no polite reminders of weather or arrival times, only the hum of systems running on autopilot. Sophia's military mind cataloged the pattern: pilot silent, attendants unsettled, a doctor called forward. These threads wove together into one unavoidable conclusion. The crisis was not in the cabin, it was in the cockpit. She noticed another man in row 12, broad-shouldered, alert eyes scanning constantly. His posture military, though his clothes were casual, his watch worn on the inside of the wrist, his gaze sharp whenever it passed the cockpit curtain. Sophia recognized the signs immediately. Federal Air Marshal, his job to blend in, his presence confirmation that the authorities expected the unexpected on every flight. Sophia leaned back, forcing herself to appear ordinary, but her thoughts sharpened into clarity. 2 pilots incapacitated would leave the aircraft in the hands of automation, and autopilot was not designed to land under emergencies. She knew this truth as deeply as she knew how to breathe. The seatbelt sign chimed. The aircraft began a slow descent. Not the gradual approach of routine, but the profile of urgency. Sophia's heart steadied. Her hands clenched the book she had abandoned. The vibrations through the fuselage told her what passengers could not feel, correction sharper than turbulence demanded. The machine was compensating for more than weather. Then Ashley emerged from the cockpit curtain carrying her medical kit. Her face pale, John Miller followed, his expression grim. He spoke in low tones, his hands trembling as he explained what he had seen. Robert Hale unconscious, Emma Davis unresponsive, both stable but not waking. The word struck Sophia with a chill colder than the air conditioning. 2 pilots down, no one left in command. Autopilot could only keep the bird steady for so long. Ashley's voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. "We are diverting to Boston Logan. Minor technical difficulties. Nothing to worry about. Please remain calm." The lie rang hollow to Sophia. She had heard the same careful tone in combat briefings, when commanders reassured crews moments before launching them into chaos. Passengers groaned with annoyance, already scrolling through phones to check connections and schedules. They did not understand what Sophia understood, that in this sky trust was only an illusion. Systems only obeyed those who commanded them, and no one was commanding now. The descent continued. Sophia's body felt it, ears pressing with altitude change, the autopilot lowering them too fast, too sharp. She inhaled deeply, the old instincts rising inside her. She rose from her seat, steady steps toward the galley, casual as if stretching legs, but her mind already calculating. She caught Ashley's eye. The flight attendant's professional mask cracked just slightly, revealing desperation beneath. "I know what you're facing," Sophia said softly. "I have experience, the kind that matters right now." Ashley stiffened, her training telling her to deflect. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. Everything is under control." But Sophia pressed gently. "I know you summoned a doctor. I know the captain and first officer are unresponsive. You need someone with aviation experience. I have that." The air marshal rose then, Michael Turner, his badge revealed with a subtle motion, his presence commanding attention. "Federal Air Marshal, explain the situation." Ashley spoke quickly, both pilots unconscious. Autopilot maintaining flight path. "We need human control for landing." Michael studied Sophia, his suspicion evident. "Ma'am, you claim aviation experience. State your qualifications." Sophia met his gaze, steady as stone, former Navy fighter pilot. 15 years of carrier operations, combat missions, 3,000 flight hours, discharge for insubordination. The words hung heavy, her shame lay bare, but there was no time to hide. Michael narrowed his eyes. "What kind of insubordination?" Sophia's voice did not waver. "The kind that saved 2 lives and 2 aircraft when a superior made an error." the kind that cost me my career. Michael weighed her words, every second precious as the engines hummed and the descent deepened. Can you land this aircraft? Sophia answered without hesitation. Yes, but not from this cabin. I need the cockpit. I need to see the instruments. I need control. John Miller interjected. If it was something environmental that affected the pilots, then anyone entering the cockpit could be at risk. But if it was something they consumed, then she may be safe. Sophia did not flinch. We do not have time for certainty. If no one takes those controls, this aircraft will not land safely. Michael finally nodded. Prove your knowledge. He demanded. What is the approach speed for a Boeing 737? Sophia answered instantly. Between 130 and 150 knots depending on weight and weather, lower with flaps, higher in crosswind. Emergency descent procedure. He pressed, reduce power, deploy speed brakes, maintain descent within limits, monitor cabin pressure, declare emergency to air traffic control. Landing gear deployment. Main gear first, nose gear second, 3 green lights confirm lock, manual backup if hydraulics fail. Her answers flowed without pause, crisp, precise, not theory but lived experience. Michael's suspicions softened into recognition. This woman was no pretender. She was a pilot. The intercom crackled. Louise, the junior attendant, his voice trembling as he tried to reassure passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain seated. Crew prepare for emergency procedures. The illusion of calm shattering with each word. Michael looked at Sophia, then at Ashley, then finally toward the cockpit door. The decision made itself. Ma'am, you are our only option. Sophia inhaled deeply, the weight of 127 lives pressing on her shoulders. She stepped toward the cockpit, every nerve alive, every instinct awakening from years of forced slumber. She was no longer just a passenger in seat 14C. She was a pilot again, and the most important test of her life was about to begin. Sophia Carter entered the narrow space at the front of the aircraft. The world of the cabin fell away, and the hum of worried passengers dimmed. What greeted her was a sight that burned in her mind. Robert Hale slumped over the controls, his headset dangling loosely. Emma Davis strapped in her seat, head tilted to the side, both breathing but unresponsive, their bodies alive yet absent. The instruments glowed with the steady rhythm of technology, dials and displays showing altitude, speed, navigation, the autopilot guiding the plane in a steady descent. But warning lights flashed in amber and red, small signals of stress building inside the machine. Louise, the young attendant, sat frozen in the jump seat, eyes wide, hands trembling. I don't know what to do, he whispered. The autopilot is still flying, but the radio keeps calling and the lights keep flashing. Sophia placed a steady hand on his shoulder. You did what you could. Now I will take over. Michael Turner stood behind her, his presence both a shadow and a safeguard. Are you certain you can fly this plane? Once you touch those controls, you're responsible for everyone. Sophia looked at the unconscious pilots, at the lights demanding human hands, at the sky beyond the cockpit glass. I have been responsible for lives before, she said calmly. The question is whether anyone else can do it. She eased into the captain's seat, her body fitting into the contours as if she had never left aviation. The feel of the yoke beneath her hands, the pedal pressure beneath her feet, her eyes scanning across the instruments with practiced rhythm, altitude steady at 22,000 feet, engines running but one showing minor imbalance, fuel sufficient, navigation locked onto Boston, autopilot still engaged. Ashley moved back toward the cabin to make an announcement, her voice trembling only slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing crew medical issues, but a qualified pilot is now in control of the aircraft. Everything is being handled professionally. Passengers shifted nervously, whispers rising, but the words carried just enough reassurance to keep panic at bay. The radio crackled with the calm authority of Boston approach. United 447, confirm pilot status and landing intentions. Sophia pressed the microphone. This is emergency pilot in command. Original flight crew incapacitated. I am a former military aviator assuming control, requesting priority landing clearance and emergency services on standby. Silence followed, the weight of the moment settling. Then the controller's voice returned, steady and professional. United 447, Boston approach copies emergency pilot status. Runway 4 cleared. Emergency services notified. Advised flight experience. Sophia answered. Carrier operations. 15 years. I can handle approach. May need system assistance for 737 specifics. Roger 447. Boeing advisors on standby. Descend to flight level 200. Maintain heading. Her hands moved across the controls, disengaging part of the autopilot, testing the feel of the aircraft. The response was sluggish but familiar. Like a ship heavy with responsibility, she adjusted trim, corrected altitude, began the controlled descent, her heartbeat steady though the weight of 127 lives pressed harder with each breath. Behind her, John Miller examined the pilots again, frustration painting his face, vitals normal, breathing steady, but no response. It is like their minds have shut down, perhaps poisoned, perhaps something environmental, but I cannot find the cause. Michael shifted, suspicion alive in his voice. Could it be deliberate? Could someone have targeted the cockpit? John hesitated. Possible. Maybe something only they consumed. Their coffee mugs were in the galley, names written on them. Sophia kept her focus, environmental or deliberate. Either way, I am at risk being here. Monitor me for symptoms, dizziness, confusion, anything, but until that happens, I will fly. The descent continued, but she felt the plane tugging unevenly, the right engine faltering slightly. Not failing, but straining, warning lights blinked with amber persistence. Sophia adjusted power, the yoke heavier in her grip. Ashley returned, reporting that passengers were growing restless, some whispering prayers, others demanding answers. Sophia nodded without turning. Tell them the truth they need, but keep it simple, reassure them. Fear spreads faster than turbulence. Michael moved closer, his suspicion not yet fully dissolved. Sophia, I need to know, your court-martial. Was it about your judgment, about recklessness? Her eyes never left the instruments. It was about defying a superior to prevent a mid-air collision. My skills were never doubted. Only my willingness to follow an order that would have killed my squadron. Michael studied her, then finally nodded, his tone softening. Then, I will trust your judgment here. Boston approach called again. United 447. We see irregularities in your path. Confirm control difficulties. Sophia replied. Minor right engine imbalance. Manageable but worsening. Request additional technical assistance. Roger. Boeing advisors online. Maintain descent. Flight level 120. Sophia's mind raced through the variables. One engine weakening. No co-pilot to share the load. Passengers beginning to sense danger. Authorities on the ground suspecting terrorism. Every second increasing the complexity of the crisis. Then John Miller's voice broke through, holding up the mugs he had found. These belonged to the pilots, still warm when I checked. If something was placed in their drinks, that explains why only they were affected. Michael's jaw tightened, deliberate then, which means this may not be accident but sabotage. Sophia absorbed the words, but she could not afford to dwell on motives. One truth mattered. The controls beneath her hands, the path through the clouds ahead, and the lives depending on her. To succeed, she adjusted the descent rate, trimming for stability, the Massachusetts coastline faint on the horizon, Boston drawing nearer, her hands steady, her voice calm as she spoke into the radio again. Boston approach, United 447, declaring emergency priority landing, managing engine imbalance, request vectors for immediate final approach. The reply came swift. United 447, cleared straight into runway 4R, emergency vehicles standing by. You are not alone. We will guide you all the way. Sophia exhaled slowly. The most difficult test of her life had begun. The world would judge her only by success or failure, and there would be no second chance. The cockpit of Flight 447 felt smaller by the minute. The glow of instruments painted Sophia Carter's face in shifting light, each warning tone cutting into the silence like a knife. The hum of the engines filled the space, but beneath it she could hear the imbalance growing sharper, the right engine struggling. Frank Wilson, a retired airline pilot who had been called forward, stood just behind her shoulder, his hair silver, his voice measured. I have not flown in years, but I know these systems. You're doing well. Sophia nodded without turning. Any insight helps. This machine is heavier than what I am used to, she admitted. Wilson watched carefully. Your scan pattern is flawless. Your correction smooth. You fly like someone who never stopped. Helen Garcia, A flight instructor with small aircraft experience slid into the narrow space near the radios. She began reading from the emergency checklists, her voice steady, flaps deployment recommendations, speed profiles, altitude calls. She became Sophia's missing co-pilot, filling the gaps between military instinct and civilian procedure. Ashley and Louise moved in and out of the cockpit, managing the frightened cabin. Some passengers whispered prayers, others demanded explanations. One shouted for the truth. Ashley calmed them as best she could, her voice firm. A qualified pilot is in control. We are preparing for an emergency landing. Please trust the crew. John Miller knelt beside Robert Hale and Emma Davis, frustration deepening in his face. Both pilots breathing steadily, pulses normal, but still locked in that strange unconsciousness. He held up the coffee mugs again, their names scrawled across the sides. If something was in these, it explains everything, but the timing, the precision, it feels deliberate. Michael Turner's jaw was tight as he listened. Sabotage, he muttered. That would explain federal alerts I am hearing. They suspect terrorism. They will treat this aircraft as hostile until we prove otherwise. Sophia forced her attention back to the instruments. She could not afford distraction. At 18,000 feet, the warning tones grew louder. The right engine indicators flickered from amber to red. Then the cockpit filled with the harsh metallic voice of the automated system. Engine failure. Engine failure. Right engine. The aircraft lurched as asymmetric thrust pulled it to the side. Sophia's hands moved instantly. Power adjusted, rudder pressed. Nose steady. She felt the heavy weight of the machine shift, sluggish but still controllable. Boston approach called. United 447 confirm engine failure. Sophia answered. Right engine lost. Single engine approach required. Declaring full emergency. Boston acknowledged. Vectors clear. Emergency vehicles in position. Boeing advisors available. Frank Wilson leaned closer. One engine is enough, but it will demand precision. Approach speed tighter, descent steeper, margins thinner. Sophia's grip on the yoke tightened. Then precision is what we will give it. Helen Garcia read out procedures. Left engine fuel flow steady. Hydraulics stable. Landing speed recommended at 145 knots. Gear deployment at 3 miles final. Sophia absorbed each word, her mind building the landing profile, every muscle remembering thousands of training hours, her body becoming the machine's balance. Michael's voice cut in. Sophia, the authorities on the ground are preparing hazmat teams, FBI agents. They may not treat you as a savior when we land. Her eyes did not leave the runway, now beginning to form on the horizon. If we land safely, they can call me what they want, but first I will bring everyone home. The Massachusetts coastline spread below, lights twinkling against winter dusk. Boston Logan International growing larger, the runways like lines of silver stretching across the ground. At 8,000 feet, the aircraft trembled again. Turbulence rippled across the fuselage. Sophia corrected, each motion smooth, precise, but the workload grew heavier. Sweat gathered on her brow. Her muscles ached, her hands never leaving the controls. Frank monitored the radios, confirming vectors with Boston approach. Helen tracked airspeed and descent rate. John monitored Sophia herself now, looking for signs of the mysterious condition that struck the crew, dizziness, tremors, confusion. But she held firm, steady eyes, steady breath. Ashley stepped back into the cockpit, her voice lower now. Passengers know something is wrong. They heard the engine fail. I told them we are safe, but they are frightened. Sophia answered without turning. Tell them fear does not land airplanes, calm does. Remind them to trust, remind them to breathe. At 5,000 feet, she configured the aircraft, flaps lowering in stages, drag increasing, the left engine straining harder, the yoke heavier in her grip. The machine fought her, but she pushed back with the calm force of experience. Frank's voice carried steady calls. 3 miles final, gear down, green lights confirm lock, airspeed 146, descent rate steady. Helen added, crosswind present, correction required at touchdown. Sophia stared through the glass. The runway stretched ahead, a silver lifeline glowing in the dark. Her body remembered combat landings and storms, carrier decks slick with rain, nights when survival came down to seconds. This was no different, though the stakes were larger, the passengers unseen behind her counting on hands they did not know. Michael leaned forward, his voice softer than before. When this is over, I will tell them what you did here, no matter what the records say. Sophia did not answer, her focus absolute. The machine demanded every part of her now, every breath, every nerve. The descent tightened, the runway filled the windscreen. At 2 miles final she adjusted power, trimmed the nose, corrected for crosswind. Helen called airspeed, 145 on target. Wilson confirmed descent rate 600 feet per minute, glide path steady. Sophia inhaled slowly, her voice calm as she spoke into the radio. Boston approach. United 447, final approach, single engine. 1 attempt, the controller answered with unwavering calm. For 147, cleared to land. All emergency crews in position. You are not alone. The words settled in her heart like a quiet anchor. But she knew the truth. When the wheels touched, it would be her skill and nothing else. The aircraft roared lower, the city lights stretching beneath them. The runway now a path of salvation. Sophia steadied the yoke, her muscles taut, her eyes locked. The final seconds of the most important flight of her life had arrived. The Boeing 737 groaned under the strain of a single engine, its fuselage rattling as if the machine itself knew this was no ordinary landing. Sophia Carter's hands locked on the controls, sweat cold across her back, every nerve alive, her eyes locked on the glowing runway that stretched ahead like a lifeline through the dark. Airspeed 147 knots, Helen Garcia called, descent rate 600 feet per minute, still on glide path. Frank Wilson echoed, left engine stable, hydraulics green, you're solid. Sophia nodded once, her voice low but steady. Hold with me. We are almost home. The ground rushed upward. The crosswind tugged at the aircraft, invisible hands trying to pull it off course. Sophia pressed rudder, angled the nose, felt the heavy resistance of the single working engine straining against drag and gravity. One wrong movement would send the 75-ton machine veering. Too early, and they would slam off center. Too late, and the landing gear would snap under sideways force. 300 feet, Helen called. Airspeed 146 knots. Perfect, Frank added. Slightly high but manageable. Adjust now. Sophia reduced power slightly, nose dipping just enough to catch the glide slope again. The runway lights gleamed brighter, red, white, a corridor leading to either triumph or catastrophe. 200 feet, the wind shifted suddenly, a gust curling over terminal buildings. The plane lurched to the right. Alarms chirped, the yoke jerked in her hands. Passengers screamed behind the closed door. Sophia corrected instantly. Power steadied, rudder pressed, nose realigned. The correction perfect but razor thin. The machine heavy but obeying her command. 100 feet, Helen's voice calm but quick. Airspeed 145, on target. Crosswind holding, steady, steady. Frank's voice followed. Rate of descent good. Keep it smooth. The runway expanded in her vision, filling the glass. The white centerline a beacon. She eased back, the flare begun. The nose lifting just slightly. Altitude melting away. Seconds stretching into eternity. Her body remembered carrier decks rushing up in storms. Nights when steel and sea waited to punish the smallest error. She drew on every memory, every scar, every lesson carved by survival. Touchdown. The left main gear slammed against asphalt. Jarring, hard, but holding. The second gear struck a heartbeat later. The nose dropped with bone-deep vibration. The aircraft shuddered violently, tires screeching, metal trembling. Sophia held firm, hands steady, rudder correcting against the crosswind. Brakes engaged, reversers on the single working engine roaring. The cabin behind erupted in cries, some fearful, some prayerful, some shouting with relief. Sophia heard none of it. Her world was narrowed to the instruments, the sound of tires, the fight to keep 75 tons centered on a strip of concrete. Speed dropped, 200 knots, then 160, then 120. The nose shivered but held. Sophia corrected each pull, steady as stone, 60 knots, then 40. The aircraft slowed into rolling silence. The emergency vehicles flashing red and white raced along the edges of the runway. The roar of fire trucks and ambulances a chorus of salvation. Finally, the aircraft stopped, brakes locked, lights flashing across the windscreen. Sophia's hands remained fixed on the yoke even as silence filled the cockpit. Her breath sharp in her chest, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a long moment, she could not move. Then slowly she released her grip, her fingers trembling. Frank Wilson exhaled, his voice rough. That was one of the finest landings I have ever witnessed. Helen Garcia's eyes glistened with tears. You saved them. You saved us all. Ashley's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed safely in Boston. Please remain seated until emergency crews arrive. The cabin filled with sobs, applause, laughter, relief spilling like floodwaters. Michael Turner stepped closer, his presence steady as always, his voice low so only she could hear. Sophia, you were right. They will question everything, your past, your record, but I saw what you did here. I will make sure they know. She looked at him, weary but resolute. I did what had to be done, nothing more. Emergency crews swarmed the aircraft, lights blazing, doors opened, fresh air flooding into the cabin. The unconscious pilots carried out on stretchers. John Miller walking beside them, still searching for answers. Passengers escorted into waiting buses, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Sophia remained in the cockpit, alone for a moment, staring at the darkened instruments. The seat beneath her still warm from effort. She had been no one in seat 14C. Invisible, forgotten, a ghost of her former self. But here, in this crucible, she had become again what she was always meant to be, an aviator, a protector, a leader. She rose finally, her knees heavy, her body aching, the voices outside a blur. She walked through the aisle, passengers turning, some reaching to touch her hand, others whispering thanks, their eyes wide with gratitude that words could not contain. Sophia Carter stepped off the aircraft into the flood of emergency lights, into the questions that would come, into the scrutiny that would follow. But none of that mattered in the quiet truth of her heart. She had carried 127 souls across the thin line between life and death, and she had brought them home. For years she had been told her career was over, her skills forgotten, her judgment flawed. But the sky had given her a second trial, and she had proven again that courage and skill were not erased by disgrace, that when everything failed, she could still fly. The runway stretched behind her, the city lights glowed ahead, and for the first time in 5 years, Sophia Carter felt alive again. Not a passenger, not an exile, but a pilot reborn in the fire of crisis. And though the world might judge her tomorrow, tonight she had already written her redemption in the sky.